What's up, Notjust developers? Welcome back to our channel. In this tutorial, we're going to dive deep into an authentication flow in React Native. So authentication is something that you'll need in most applications that you are going to build. So I decided to dedicate this tutorial to dive deep into that. And by the end of this tutorial, you're going to have the skills and the confidence to build and integrate authentication flows in your applications. We're going to cover everything from the front end, from building the UI components to integrating the form, to managing the form state, validating everything, then integrating it into Expo Router to know more about how to do that, and even on the back end to manage our users and even adding social sign-ins with Google, Apple, Facebook, and others. So let's go ahead and see what exactly we're going to learn by following this tutorial. So first of all, we're going to learn how to build the user interface of an authentication flow with screens like sign in, sign up, validating a confirmation code, and so on. We're going to learn how to validate data and how to manage the form state using React Hook form and using Zod schemas. This is going to be, even though we can do without it, I don't want to take shortcuts. I want to teach you a production grade system that can help you manage form states at scale. We're going to learn how to integrate everything with Expo Router when it comes to authentication and how to guard and protect different parts of our app. This is also something that a lot of our students are asking me, and I decided it's going to be important to explain how this system works. We're going to also manage users with Clerk. We're going to integrate with Clerk for the backend provider of our authentication flows to handle functionalities like signing in, signing up, managing user account, integrating with different social providers, and so on. That's what also we're going to see, how to implement these social sign-ins to sign in with Google, with Apple, with Facebook, and so on. If you don't know about Clerk, Clerk is the most comprehensive user management platform. For web, they have pre-built components that you can drag and drop in your application. For mobile, they have a very powerful API that allows us to connect it with our system to manage users in our application. What I like about Clerk is that not only do they cover the most important parts of authentication, which I always recommend people like not to build the same thing that already exists out there and focus on the important features of your application. So by using Clerk, not only will you get like the basic functionality of authentication, you're also going to get way more in-depth features because Clerk is specializing in authentication. So things like multi-factor authentication, fraud and abuse prevention, session management on different devices, different locations, social sign-ins with more than 20 providers, email and one-time password with email and SMS, magic links, and a lot more. So thank you very much, Clerk, for making this video possible. And go ahead and follow the link in the description below to create a Clerk account because we're going to need it later in the video. And if you're ready, I think we can get started. So let's roll the intro and start building. Hello everyone who is joining us live. How are you doing, guys? So let's go ahead and open our terminal and initialize a new project. You might already have a project and you might want to integrate this in your own project, so that's totally fine. We're going to integrate this in the React Native in an Expo application. So let's go ahead. I'm going to navigate to some of my projects, YouTube. And let's go ahead. I'm going to make dir. Today is, this one. And let's go ahead and initialize our project. I'm going to do that with npx create expo app. I'm going to put at latest to make sure that I'm using the latest version of create expo app tool. And I'm going to make sure to use template in order to choose a specific template that I want. I don't want to start with a default template because that one would include a lot of stuff. And I don't want to clutter the tutorial right from the beginning. But after I select template, I'm going to scroll down until we select blank TypeScript template. We're going to use TypeScript in this video to make sure that we validate all the data. We have like type safe data for our forms. Also, when we will integrate React hook form, that's also going to be very important. The name of our application is going to be auth masterclass, or let's do, yeah, React Native Authentication, something like that. And let's wait a couple of seconds for Expo to initialize and install all the dependencies for our application. Let me also bring this one here so I can see the live chat. How are you doing, guys? Excited for this one? Hello, Rogelio. I saw that you are excited. Hello, Hassan, Khan. We see that our application is ready, so let's go ahead and open it in our editor of choice. In your case, it can be Visual Studio Code or some other editor of choice. More recently, I started using more and more Cursor. So let's go ahead and do Cursor and do React Native Authentication. If you don't know, Cursor is a fork of Visual Studio Code. So that's why it looks very similar to Visual Studio Code. But it has like additional AI features that in day-to-day life, it's helping me a lot. In tutorials, sometimes it's getting in the way, but we'll see how it goes. Let's go ahead and right away open a terminal by going at the top, new terminal, and let's do npm start to kickstart our project. We already have it running somewhere, so maybe I'm going to stop it and I'm going to start it again. How auto OTP field work? We're going to, not sure if we're going to get into that, but I'm going to definitely show you because it's a property on your text input. If you correctly tag it with the right type, the system will automatically autofill. So here we have our application. Is this going to be heavy to absorb? What do you mean by heavy to absorb? I'm going to try to explain everything, and initially it's going to be easy. We're going to cover everything step by step. I'm going to try to assume it's least about your previous experience, but at some points we're going to get into some advanced stuff. But again, I'm going to explain everything, and I'm going to explain like what things are optional and what are required. Now that our application is running, here we have the application running on the emulator. If you are new to this and you do not have an emulator or for iOS or Android installed, the easiest way to follow the tutorial is going to be to download the Expo Go application on your physical device, either on Android or iOS, and then scan the QR code that you're going to see here. And it's going to open up in your physical device, and you can continue working like that. Now let's go ahead and see what is the first file that our application is going to load, and this is the app.tsx. App.tsx, here we see a text. Let's go ahead and say hello, and it will automatically update. I can already go ahead and start building our UI, because the next step is going to start building the user interface for our authentication flows. For that, we need a couple of screens with some components like sign in and so on. So let's go ahead and start by building the sign in form. We're going to start with a title here, sign in, and then we're going to need some inputs. For a text input, we can manage it using text input component from React Native. If we go ahead inside our component here and render a text input with a placeholder, we're going to see it here right away. If you don't have a placeholder, you might think that it's not rendering, but it's actually there, so it's very hidden. If you just add a placeholder, for example, email, we're going to see the input there. Now let's go ahead and give it some style. For example, style equals styles.input. Now in the input styles here, let's go ahead and say input. Let's give it some styles. First of all, I want to add a border width, maybe 1. I want to say that I need some padding so that the border has a little bit of space, like padding 10. And I want to make the corner rounded. So border radius 5, maybe that's going to be enough. I want the border not to be like pure black, so I can do border color, maybe CCC. And that already looks a little bit better. On the whole container, I'm going to remove one of these, either align items or justify content. I'm going to try to remove justify content, and no, it's always the other, the other one. I'm going to remove align items center so that we make sure that it's not centered, like not everything is centered, it's full screen. I will also add like some padding on this container, like padding 20. So there is some spacing there. I can also add a gap property, and a gap property on a container will add spacings between children. So as you can see, by adding gap 10 or gap 50, we increase the space between the label or the title and the input here. Actually, let's go ahead and give our title some styles as well by saying text style styles.title. I'm gonna go into the style sheet and say, hey, title. First of all, I want to increase the font size. So font size 24 is going to be probably good. And maybe I'm going to increase also the font weight. It recommends me to do font weight bold, but I usually don't like the pure bold, so I go with a 600, which is a little bit lighter than bold. Bold is a 700 width, font weight, I mean. And I don't need the gap 50 here, actually. I'm going to go back to gap 10 or maybe 20. Nice. So we have an email input, we have a text for the header. Let's go ahead and copy paste the text input once again for our password. Password. Now we have a password here. If I'm going to go ahead and write something in the password, usually we would like the input to password input to hide the values. To do that, there is a simple prop called secure text entry. And if you give it true, the input is going to be, the values of the input are going to be hidden as we are expected for a password input. And when you have secure property equal to true, you can simplify it by just sending the property name that will automatically send the value true there. Perfect. The last thing when it comes to the UI on this screen is going to be the button. We can use a button from React Native like this, and we can say button. We're going to give it a title sign in, and maybe an on press is going to be a simple function that does nothing. Later on, we're going to do the logic. A button component from React Native is going to render an actual native button. So that means that on iOS, it will look something like this. On Android, it's going to look a little bit differently because it's a native button, something that is rendering a native button on iOS and Android. This might be fine in a lot of cases, but I'm pretty sure that you might want custom design for your buttons in the authentication flow. That's why instead of a button that has very limited styling options, we're going to import a pressable. And a pressable is similar to a view, pressable, that inside the pressable we're going to render a text that will say sign in. And as you can see, it doesn't have any styles, but it accepts an on-press event. But we can say here console log pressed. So if I do on press console log pressed and open that tools, the terminal, and press C to clear it, if I press on this button, we're going to see the log pressed. Now the only thing is to go ahead and adjust a little bit the styles. For example, giving it styles.button, maybe here styles.button text. Let's go ahead, and in here we're going to have the button styles and the button or the button text styles as well. For the button, I want a background color, for example, blue, but maybe blue is not the best one. So, I mean, not this pure blue. I'm going to do something like this. For the text color, I'm going to do white. And let's finish the text. I will increase a little bit the font size to 16, and I'm going to increase the font weight again to 600 to be almost bold. Now back on the button container, let's go ahead and give it some padding. By giving padding, we're going to make some space for it. Maybe even like 15 would look better. We're going to give it a border radius 5 to make it rounded, similar to how we have it on the input. And probably you want the text to be in the center, so I can give a line item center to put the sign in button in the middle. Again, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on the UI. I want a very simple, minimalistic one, because I'm pretty sure you have your own designs, you have your own preferences, so you're going to adjust the styles here. I want to mostly cover the big picture and every single step that we need to think about when integrating this system. Now I'm going to scroll up and I'm going to remove the old button, and I'm going to leave my pressable like this. Okay, so let me see the next step. I think I'm going to go ahead and do git status, git add, git commit -m. Let's do basic sign in screen. The next step I want to cover while we're still here is one common problem when designing forms. When designing forms on an emulator, we do not see this, but usually what's going to happen is, let me see how to, when you have a form and the user highlights or focuses on one input, the keyboard, the virtual keyboard is going to appear. And that has a problem because sometimes, if you don't think about it, the form itself might be below the input. For example, if I'm going to go on the container and say justify content flex and to put the form at the bottom of the screen, and if I'm going to go ahead and open the how is it, man, come on, the keyboard, we're going to say that the keyboard hides our component. Let's fix this one, and to fix it, we're going to use the keyboard avoiding view from React Native. So we need to import the keyboard avoiding view and wrap it around our components with different behaviors like this. Let's go ahead and first import keyboard avoiding view from React Native. And let's transform our top view here from a normal view to a keyboard avoiding view. If I do that, it should already work. Maybe I'm going to do here flex end to make sure that we can see something happening. One thing on the keyboard avoiding view is that behavior is going to be different on different platforms. On iOS, it should be padding, and on Android, on any other operating system, it should be hide. So to check that, we're going to import platform from React Native, and the behavior is going to depend on the platform.os. So if it's equal to, is it to iOS? Yes. Then question mark, the value is going to be padding, otherwise it's going to be hide. If I try right now, as we can see, on iOS it's working, and I'm going to try to run it also on Android to make sure that on Android is also working. I'm going to put Android here, and when it's ready, I'm going to show you. So now when the keyboard opens, this view is going to adjust either using padding at the bottom, or it's going to adjust its height to make sure that our component is here at the top. Let me go ahead and do git, git status, git add, git commit, key. Perfect. I'm going to double check if it's working on Android. Let's wait until it opens. Okay, here we have Android. Let me actually bring it. Let me bring it here. So where is the Expo Go? Okay, so the form is at the bottom. And if I go ahead and focus here, and how do I open the keyboard on Android? Let me double check that. Anyone remembers the show keyboard? Alt K. Yes. I don't know why, but it's okay. It's Command K for me. Okay, so as we can see here, it's also working. And on iOS and on Android, it's working properly. Now that we have this in place, I think I'm going to go back to flex to the center to have a form in the center. And in this case, it's still going to move up to make sure that it's in the center of the screen. Will this video later be available as a normal YouTube video? Yes. Hello, M. Okay, perfect. What do I want to do next? Let me remember. I saw a question how to autofocus on a text input. For example, the text input component, it has a autofocus property that if you provide it, which again, it's a shortcut to autofocus equal true, then it should autofocus automatically on this text input when we go on that screen. So as you can see, if as soon as I get on the screen, it auto-focused on the input. So this is how you can do that with the autofocus property. Perfect. Okay, now I'm talking a little bit about the properties. Another important property, especially on the email field, that I see a lot of application missing is if I go now on a normal text input and I start writing my email, you're going to see that it will automatically capitalize it. So on iOS, the normal text input by default auto capitalizes the text that you write. But you can adjust that by saying auto capitalize equal to none. So if you do none, then you're not going to have it. And maybe you can also, okay, let me do that in a second. So now if I start writing something, it's not going to capitalize it. And for email, that's perfect. Another thing is that we can also define the keyboard type that you want to use. For example, I can go ahead and use a keyboard type, in this case, email address. If I do that and go back to my Expo, if I open the keyboard, the virtual keyboard here, you're going to see that it's an email keyboard with the @ here on the keyboard easily available. And there are different keyboard types for different values. So I recommend going to React Native documentation and going to text input and seeing what other things you can adjust here. For example, auto capitalize here, autocomplete. You can implement autocomplete based on different values. For example, if I go ahead and say that I want to autocomplete email, this is a very helpful one. Autocomplete email. In that case, you basically tell the system that this is an email field and you're going to get autocomplete suggestions. Here I do not have them, but on a real device, we're going to have suggestions for autocompleting email fields. And you can do the same for birthday, for address, for family name, and so on. Autocomplete new password. Is that going to recommend a new password? Maybe. And for iOS only, you will have these values. For Android only, we have these values. What else? Autocorrect. This is also probably for email important to do false. We don't want to allow the system to autocorrect. In a lot of cases, maybe that's not going to be what the user needs. Let me scroll through this and point out to the important ones so that you know. Yeah, most of them we covered. You can specify a max length, the number of lines if you have a lot of lines there. And yeah, these are the ones that I wanted to point towards, especially when we're talking about a sign-in screen or authentication forms. Perfect. Let's go ahead and continue. Because what I want to do next, and it's mostly going to help us reuse some of this stuff, is transform our inputs and pressable and buttons into reusable components. Why do we need that? Before I actually start it, let me do a git add, git commit text input props. So the next step is to transform these ones into reusable components. Even though at the moment they are quite simple components, they have some styles, like the button styles, the input style, and later when we're going to need the same styles of inputs and buttons in other places in our application, I don't want to come back here and copy and paste the styles, because that's going to lead to inconsistencies. Sometimes you're going to update the color of a button on the sign-in screen, but you're going to forget to do it on the sign-up screen. So let's go ahead and see how we can extract this into reusable components. For that, I'm going to create a new folder called source. I like to keep all my files in the source directory, and there I'm going to create a folder called components. The first component that I'm going to do there is going to be, should we do a button or a text input first? Let's go ahead and do a text input. So custom input.tsx, we're gonna give this name, and reusable components is a simple function. So let's export it from this file. Let's call it custom input. As we said, it's a simple function that will return something. What will return it? Well, it will return a text input, like this. Let's go make sure that we import text input from React Native and also the style sheet. For the styles of this text input, let's go ahead at the bottom and say styles equal style sheet create, and we're gonna have a styles for the input. Let's go ahead back in our app.tsx and copy the input styles from here. I'm actually going to cut them from here. Come on, Control X, and paste them in our custom input like this. Now let's give it here to the styles.input, and back in our app.tsx, we see that we lost styles for our text inputs here, but we're no longer going to have a text input like this. I'm going to comment them out. We're going to have a custom input that we have to import from our source components custom input. Having it like this, everything looks nice, but how do we send data from the parent component from app.tsx down there? For example, the placeholder. How do we do that? Well, we can do that, for example, placeholder email. We can do that here, but on the custom input here, we're going to have to receive, for example, the placeholder and send it here like placeholder equal placeholder. And it works. But imagine that we have to do this for every single property of a text input, or you're going to do them slowly. Like you need placeholder, you're gonna put it here. Then you're gonna need the value, you're going to do that. Secure text enter and so on. We don't want that. We want a more flexible way of saying that this custom input can receive any property as similar to a text input, and then we're going to simply take those properties and send them to a text input. Let's see how we can do that. And for that, I'm going to define the types of my custom input. Let's call them custom input props. And let's say that the custom input props will have some types that we're not going to define now anything. Custom fields. But it will merge together with a text input props. Let's import text input props from React Native. Text input props. And if I say that these props are custom input props, we're going to see that it works But back in our app.tsx, to this custom input, I can send anything that I could send to a normal text input, such as autofocus, and it's going to work. And basically, I'm going to copy everything from the text input and I'm going to give it back to the custom input. In this case, I don't need to send a style, so I'm going to remove it from here. But now we send everything here. Even though we send it, I don't think it's going to work. Because, for example, let's see auto capitalize. If I start typing, maybe I need to reload. If I start typing here, we see that even though we are sending the auto capitalize, in custom input, we are never applying it back to the text input. What I want to say is that, hey, give me all the props. And what I'm going to do is, instead of sending them manually, I'm going to destructure them inside the text input. Now, all the properties that we are sending from here, they get to a custom input and they are destructuring the text input. So I can see that everything is applied here with autofocus, with the keyboard type, and so on. So this is a very simple way of how we can expand or extend components by getting extending their properties, getting the properties and then destructuring them there, and then adding some additional things like styles or logic and so on. Later on, you're going to see that we're going to add way more logic here. For now, it's quite simple, and you might think like, we did all of this just for the styles. Well, yes and no. Even for styles, that's important because we have them in the same place. But later, we're going to see that it's going to help us even more. What I want to say is that now, for example, if from the custom input I want to say style, I want to override some styles with a background color red, we're going to see that what? We actually have a background color red, but we lost all the other styles. That's because we apply the styles before we destructure the props. And in that case, the props are overriding the styles. If I go this way to set styles after the props, we're going to see that we are not overriding it, but we are losing. We cannot customize it from the outside. We do not see the background color red. So in this case, what we have to do is first we destructure the props here, because things that we set here we don't want to be overridden by the props, but we also want to merge together these styles with something that we receive from the outside. We're going to do that in an array, so we can say that the style is going to be styles input from here and also props.style from the outside. Now the styles are merged, so we can also adjust some of the styles. And because the ones that are coming from the outside are later, we can even adjust like the border width, like the border color. We can adjust it from here as well. So this is a little bit of basics of React and React Native. And in fact, I'm going very in depth into these topics on how to manage everything, how to extend these things in the React Native Mastery course. If you're interested, check it out at notjust.dev/React Native Mastery. And the second module here is, where is it? There is a bug, but the second project is going in depth into these topics and showing you even more information details on how you can extend components. Anyway, now that our text input is here, the custom text input, we can also do that for the password. For example, I'm going to render another custom input, and I'm going to get the things from here, but there is not a lot of properties. It's the placeholder password. I don't need to send any styles anymore, and the secure text entry. Just like that, we have a password and the email. And I can go ahead and remove the comments from the above. Make sure that also let's clean things that we do no longer need. And now everything is perfect. So this was our git commit custom input. Let me double check if there is anything else that I wanted to show you here on the custom input side. Maybe not. Maybe that's good enough. Okay, perfect. Let's go ahead and do the same thing for our button, because our button here, pressable, it has the button style and button text style. What I want to do is I want to create a custom component called custom button.tsx. And here, let's go ahead and export default function custom button. And let's return and render this pressable. I'm going to actually copy them from here, the pressable and the text. I'm going to return them here. Let's go ahead and make sure to import pressable from React Native, text from React Native, and the style sheet from React Native. Let's make sure to create the style sheet here below the component, and from app.tsx, move button and the button text styles in our custom button style sheet. Now I can go ahead and take the custom button in our app.tsx, and instead of rendering this pressable, I'm going to go ahead and say, render me a custom button like this. But first I need to import it from our components. So, as we can see, it still looks the same, but we need to make sure that our custom button actually extends the pressable so that we can adjust things like the on press event from here, from the outside. Console log pressed. At the moment we cannot do that, but let's go ahead and do the same thing by extending the properties with their types and sending them down to the pressable component. To do that, we're going to define a type called custom button props that is going to have some fields here. But one important field, besides the custom fields, it's also going to have the pressable props. Let's make sure to import pressable props from React Native. And let's go ahead and say that props is going to equal to custom button props. The only thing that's left is to go ahead and instead of hard coding the on press event inside the custom button, we're going to delete it and simply destructure all the props that we receive from the above. For style, usually it's good to merge them together so that we can allow users to adjust it from the above. Props.style. Not sure why it doesn't like it. Or empty. No. I think it's a simple TypeScript issue here for the, so for now I'm going to leave it like this, not overriding them. So now from the app.tsx, a custom button can receive anything that a pressable can, such as on press event. And now if I'm going to look into the logs, clear them and press on it, we're gonna see pressed. Good. Another thing that a custom button needs to be dynamic is the text that it renders, like this sign in. To do that, that's where we're going to adjust here the add additional parameters or additional properties to our custom button, such as the text that we want to display inside the button. How do we get the text? Well, we could do that like this, props.text. So back in our app.tsx, the only thing that's left is to give a text sign in, and it's going to work. Everything is fine like this, but I will go one extra step. At this moment, as you can see, these properties, we destructure all of them into the pressable. But the properties is a combination of pressable props and our custom properties. That means that this text is going to be destructured into the pressable. And even though it's not going to hurt, but in some cases it might lead to inconsistent behaviors. So what I want to do usually is I will destructure the properties here, and I say, hey, give me the text, and with a rest operator which looks like ... and here a name, for example, pressable props. What I basically say is, hey, this text, destructure it because it's something separate, use it here, and everything else besides the text, put it into an object called pressable props, and I will render them here. And now everything works the same, but here the pressable props will exclude the text that should not be there. And I don't know if you need the actual pressable props to call it. I can leave it props or other props and so on. So yeah, now the button works. Perfect. Now that we have our custom button, I can do git add git commit -m custom button. Perfect. On a custom input, I have autofocus. Depends. Okay, so we have now our basic building blocks for our forms. We have buttons, we have inputs, and I think we are ready to move on to the next step. And the next step is form validation. The next step is actually not only form validation, but form management, form data management, and also validation. Because at the moment we are rendering these inputs, which in a way is it's the same text input with additional styles. So the problem is that if I would have here in our application a function called on sign in, this is going to be a function console log sign in, and if I would like to display, like call this button when we press on the custom sign in button, so sign in on press, we call the on sign in. If usually in this kind of functions, you need access to the credentials, you need access to the email value and the password value that the user input. The problem is that at the moment we cannot have access to this data because we didn't bind anything to them. So now they are uncontrolled inputs. We just render them, but we do not control their value. In order to control their value, there are two things that we have to do. First of all, we need a state. So from React, let's import a hook useState. Let's define the first state, which is going to be our email, and set email. And then useState is going to be like this. What we can do is we can take the email, and for the custom input here, we can say that the value is email. So this is the first step, sending the value. This way, we say that the value of a custom input should always match the value of our state. And if I'm going to try to type something there, we see that it tries to type, but it goes back because we never update our state. And that's what's happening. The custom input always remains an empty string. We need to do the second thing besides the value. We need to update the state when the custom input changes. So on change text, we're going to call set email. Now, what's happening is we can type something here. When the user types in the text input, onChange text callback is called, and it's calling the set email. If you're new to this, if you have experience, this will make sense. If you're new to this, I will expand this logic. So the onChange text is a function that will receive the new text. And what we are doing is we are calling the set email setter, which is a function, with a new text. So that's what actually is happening. We are sending a function to the onChange text that is going to call it, giving us the new and up-to-date text from the input. And we're going to use that to update our state. Updating our state means that the email state is a new one and is going to set it back to the value. So this is what a controlled input looks like, where we are controlling the value. So it always reflects what we have in state. And we are listening to updates and updating our state. I'm going to move back because whenever you have this function that calls a function with the same data without changing anything, you can simply give a reference to your function. So that's why initially I have it like this, and it looks much cleaner. So now in the sign in, I can say sign in and email, and you're going to see that if I press now on the button, I have access to the value that the user wrote there. So this is the first step into how you can manage the forms, and you can do that pretty well. In this one sign in, you're going to do here first maybe manual validation to make sure that the emails is provided, to make sure that the emails is actually an email with some regex validation and so on. And then you're going to think about, okay, but how can I manage errors? Well, for that, you're going to probably have another state for the email error. And if some validation fails, you're going to update that state and so on. So you already have two states for just one field. Then you're going to get into complexity of, but when do I reset the error? Because if a user starts typing, then maybe I need to revalidate, see if the error disappeared, and so on. And you can already see how complicated is this data management in a form for a field when you also want validation, error states, and so on. And if you take this example and multiply it to a form that has multiple fields, you have these states for every single field. In this case, we have only two, like email and password, but long forms can have way more data that you're going to have to manage yourself. This becomes really complex if you're doing it in a do-it-yourself way. I'm not saying it's not possible, and in small scenarios, go ahead and do it like this, because this is simple and it's going to do the work. In this tutorial, however, I want to show you a system of how I would do these kind of things in production to make sure that they're scalable and easy to manage, easy to add new stuff, and easy to handle. That's why instead of managing the state of a form ourselves with use states, I'm going to go ahead and use React Hook Form. React Hook Form is a performant, flexible, and extensible forms with easy to use validation. Let's go ahead and getting started and see how we can use it. First of all, I'm going to install npm install React Hook Form in our project. And to manage the form, what we have to do is first import a hook called use form from React Hook Form. At the top of our component, we're going to say, hey, let's define our form. Defining our form, we can also provide some options, such as maybe default values. And for the default values, let's say that email, we want to be abc@gmail.com. notjust.dev. I just want to show you a default value here. Perfect. Now, the thing is that on web, using the use form is even easier, because on web, a lot of these things are handled pretty much automatically, like the connection between our form, because this is our form. This is where the data for our form is managed. And the connection between the form and our inputs is done a little bit easier on the web. On mobile, however, with a little bit of effort from our side, we can make it easy. So what we need to do is, from React Hook form, import a component called controller. So the controller, we're going to render it. We're going to wrap it around our custom input. But let's take it again step by step. Let's say that, hey, I want to do a controller, and we're going to close it. A controller needs to know what it controls. That's why from the use form, we're going to get back the control. We're going to take the control and send it to the controller as control. Now, the controller also has a function called render. Is it? Yeah, it should be a render. And this function is going to specify what should render inside the controller. What we should render, I'm going to stay away a little bit from the custom inputs. Or maybe let's actually render another one. Or, yeah, let's do a text input. So this is what we should render, a text input. What else does it need? Oh, it also needs a name, because the controller is the whole form, but the name is just one value. For example, email. I needed here like normal parentheses, because I need to return the text input from the render. Something like this. For the style, let me give it background color red. So we have the controller there at the top. Gray. Let's do gray. So if I go here and start writing something, man, gray is snow. If I start writing something, we're gonna receive anything, but we're getting there. We are basically wrapping a normal text input inside a controller. This is the first step to connect this text input to our form. I'm going to go back and show you that it's still nothing happening by going ahead and taking the field set, the form state. Yeah, maybe not errors. Maybe. Let me do it the next step. I'm going to get here the handle submit. The handle submit is something quite important, because the handle submit is what will start the validation process. And we're going to see later how the validation is going to look here. But what we should know is that the buttons in our forms, in this case our custom button here, what it should do is we usually have the onSign-in function, or like what should happen after the form is validated, like sending the data to the server. What we have to do is wrap this one around the handle submit. So what's going to happen in this way, it's first going to run through React Hook form to make sure that the form is valid, and only then, and if the form validation is complete, it's going to get in the onSign-in. And onSign-in is actually going to receive the data that at the moment I'm going to say any. So the data is going to be the values of the fields. So that's why I wanted to show you that now, if I go ahead and click on this button, we see that we get the data email that is coming, but this data is coming from the default values. And if I write something here, it's not going to change. That's because we have in this controller where we render the text input, we need to connect the controller to the text input. Remember, a text input that does not have a value and an onChange text value, and the onChange text is an uncontrolled form text input. We need to make it controlled, and specifically by this controller. To do that, we're going to receive something from the render here. We're going to receive an object that from where we can destructure the field, and the field will have the value and will have the onChange, and also will have a onBlur, a very important value. So let's take these values and pass them down to the text input value. OnChange text is going to be onChange, and onBlur is going to be onBlur. Now if I do that, we see that the text input here at the top has the default value from our form. If I update it and then press sign in, we're going to see that our sign in method will receive the updated value. So now our text input from here is connected to the controller on the field with the name email, because this name is the property here. And it's connected with value, it's updating it, and also handling this onBlur correctly. Okay, good. So you might think that I showed you with a normal text input, just not to think about the custom input for a second. What we could do is, obviously, we could take this custom input and put it here and send there the value and onChange text from there. And it's going to work totally fine. For example, value to the email and onChange text here, and it's going to work. Like if I'm going to, at the top here, change something and do sign in, we're going to see it. But I don't really like this syntax because of rendering a controller and then a custom input, because it makes it always harder to do. And for me, it's easy because I remember the syntax, I've done it so many times, but I'm pretty sure for a beginner, this syntax is kind of like challenging, like and cumbersome to always have to write this controller and then a custom input in a render with remembering to send all the fields here and so on. That's why I'm not going to do it here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to maybe copy this controller and move into our custom input component, and I'm going to wrap it and handle it at the custom input level. Let's do that here by saying, hey, I'm going to put this controller, I'm going to put some parentheses, I'm going to copy what we already have here in terms of text input with props destructuring, and I'm going to replace it inside here. We're gonna get there in a second. Let's go ahead and import controller from React hook form. The value, wait a second, no, it's like this. So I'm going to take it step by step because AI already fixed it for me. What do we need? We need the value from the controller render to send it to our text input. So let's do that. Think here at the top. So value, onChange text, and onBlur. I'm going to do them here. But we also need the control, and we also need the name of that field. That's where we're going to send here custom properties. We're going to need control property of type any for a second and the name of type string. From props, let's also do the same thing. Let's get the control, let's get the name, let's put everything else, which is the text input props, into the props object. These props will go to the text input, the control will go to the controller, and the name should go to this name. Like this, name. Now, just like that, we go back to app.tsx, and I'm going to remove a controller that we had here. Make sure to have one of these custom inputs. And in the custom input, what I'm going to do is, first of all, let me remove a value on onChange text. I no longer need them. For the same reason, I'm going to remove my custom state. But the custom input now expects the control. So let's send the control there, and it expects the name. This one is email. Same things for the password. It expects the control and name, password. Just like that, we connected two custom inputs to our control, to our form, with two fields, name email, name password. Just like that, if I go here and say password 123 sign in, we have sign in with an object with email and password. All handled and managed by the use form from the React hook form. So I no longer need the controller here. I no longer need the React, the text input, the pressable, and I think that's it. Perfect. In this case, like as you saw, like we can provide default values like this to the form. In this case, we didn't need any, so I'm going to remove it. But how do we manage the validation? Let me double check here the rules. I still want to do them step by step. Required. Input controller rules. Maybe if I go into the custom input on the controller, if I'm not mistaken, I can provide here rules such as required equal true. If I do that, and we know that whenever I press the button, it logs the sign in because that's what we do in the on sign in press. But if I go ahead and remove the email and do sign in, what we see is that the function sign in is not called. Let's remember why that happens. I was saying before, when we press custom sign in, we wrapped our on sign in function that does the console log inside the handle submit. Handle submit is coming from use form, and what it's going to do is first it's going to validate the form state, and only if all the fields are valid, it's going to go ahead and call the function that we give it. So only then it's going to call the on sign in. In our case, we said that the custom input has the rules required. That's why if I don't have any values and press sign in, it's not going to propagate to this function. It's going to stop at the handle submit in the use form. And the thing is that we also have access to the errors in the use form. If we need access to the whole form errors, there is form state, and from form state we can take the errors and we can do here console log errors. So if I look here, if I press this button, we see that the errors has an error at the email field without any message, but we see that the type is required, and for the password as well. So we see that we have errors and we can display them. If I go back to the custom input, I said required equal true, but if you say required equal to a string, that string is going to be returned as the message of the error. So now if I'm going to press it, we see message, this field is required. And what you can do at the up level, you can loop through these errors and render them on the UI. But rendering like all the errors of a form on the UI maybe is not the best way, because a better UX, user experience, would be to render the error very close to the place where the error happened. We don't want to be like those government sites where you have like a long form, you fill everything in, and then at the top it shows a mystic error and you don't know like, okay, but what field is wrong? We want to show like exactly what field is wrong. The nice thing about React Hook form is that if you go back in the custom input, in the controller, besides the field, we also have field state here. So we saw form state, which is the state of the whole form. This is just the state of a field, and it has the error as well. So what I can do now is I can say, hey, render here a fragment like this, because I want to render multiple elements. One of them is going to be text input, but below the text input, I will say, hey, if there is an error, I will render a text component that will show the error.message. I'll make sure to import text from React Native, and I'll give it a styles error, and I can say, hey, the error should be of color. I like the color crimson from errors. So now if I'm gonna go ahead and press sign in, we see this field is required. Perfect. I don't really like the spacings between everything, and for that reason I'm going to render, instead of the fragment, I'm going to render here a view, and a view imported from React Native as well. We'll group them together and apply like a different styles to them. So if I do that, we see that now they are here. And at this level on the view, I can add a styles container, and on the container I can say, hey, I want a gap of very small gap of 2 pixels between the error field and the text input and the error field. Come on, what's happening? Hey, Vadim, are you going to implement authentication with Google or other social network providers? Yes, I'm going to do that. So now if I go here and say sign in, yep, there is this gap. Maybe 2 is not enough, 4 probably is going to be enough. So perfect, we have the errors and they are dynamically rendered, displayed below the text input. In fact, there is also like a very small improvement that I like to do. Pay attention at this position of these form elements. If I press sign in, they kind of jump, because this text with the error, it appears out of nowhere. It wasn't here, and then when it appears, it needs to move our stuff away to make space for it. I don't like this approach because it makes the UI jump back and forth from different state. You're going to see that as well. If you start typing, the error goes away. And if you go back to the error state, it's going to appear. So in this case, you can see how things are moving up and down. For that reason, I'm not going to conditionally render the text, but I'm going to say, put a question mark here and always render the text, but have the text either empty or the error message. In this case, it's working here, and if I do sign in, it's simply going to appear the message, but this text component was always here. And oh, come on. When I start typing, it simply appears below. Perfect. Maybe the spacings between items should be smaller, the inputs now, because when there is no error, like maybe it's going to look too far apart, but that one we can adjust later. Maybe at the up layer, the gap. I might put the custom inputs into a separate view because everything else is something not related to the inputs, and this one on the style form, I'll say that I want a smaller gap between the items of maybe even 5. So now if I do sign in, yeah, we see we have space for the arrow. We have a little bit of spacing between them, but we optimize it for when there is no error, and now it looks a little bit better. Okay, perfect. The only thing that we see how we manage these validation errors, but the rules here, we hard-coded it, the required. And we can go ahead and extract them to our properties and pass them from the above, like as rules for these ones here. And React Hook form has like a lot of pre-built rules that you can work with, and it's quite powerful. But I really like in this case when it comes to validating forms and different larger objects, I like to use libraries that are specialized into that. And one of these libraries that is specialized into that is called Zod. Zod is a TypeScript schema validation with static type interfaces. What does that mean? That means that we define a schema, and then we can take an object, put it through that schema, and validate it to make sure that it conforms with how we specify that schema. And back, we also get a very strictly typed field value. The good thing is that if you go back to React Hook form under schema validation here, we're going to see that it supports schema validation with Yup, Zod, Super, Construct, Joy, and so on. So what we need to do is we need to simply install hook form resolvers. I'm not going to install Yup. Instead of Yup, I'm going to install Zod. So let's open the terminal and say npm install at hook form resolvers and Zod. Perfect. Now that we are going to do the validation using the schema, I no longer need these rules. So I'm going to remove the rules from here, and I'm going to go back into the app.tsx because here is where we are managing this form. First, we need to define the schema. We don't need any email regex. Let's do sign in schema. The sign in schema, we're going to define it using Zod. So let's import Z from Zod. And with z.object, we say that, hey, the sign-in schema should be an object. And inside here, we're going to define the fields of that object. One of them is going to be email, and we can say that it's going to be a string. And the password is also going to be a z.string. And here, you can actually define more validation rules. For example, on the email, we can say that I want the email, this field to be an email. It's automatically going to apply some validation for email. And for password, I can say I want this to be a minimum of 8 characters. Now, what do we need to do with this schema is we're going to take the schema and we're going to say, hey, use form. We're also going to need the import Zod resolver from hook form resolvers. Now, when we define our form, we specify how should it resolve values, how should we handle the values. So resolver, we're going to use the Zod resolver function, and we're going to send the sign-in schema. How's it called? Zod resolver? Is it? Yeah, so it's hook form resolver / Zod. Okay, now, just with these things in mind, if I go ahead and press sign in, we see email is required, password is required. If I'm going to do something else here, email is invalid because we have .email here. Password, if I do two strings, it says string must contain at least 8 characters. So with simple this schema, like as you can see, we have like so much more powerful validations enabled. Give me 1 second. Got my coffee. Have you thought about using TanStack form instead of React Hook form? Actually, I haven't tried it, but I really want to get into that. I really like the TanStack query in React Native, and I believe TanStack form can also work. So I'm going to look into that. The values that we see here on the screen, starting with required, right? Let's reload, for example. If I do this required, you can actually adjust it by saying that, by sending a string in this string, by sending a here saying email is required, and in the email is invalid. Okay, maybe here we need it as a message. We are going to see what? If I do that, we see email is required. If I do something else, we see invalid email that is coming from here. So as you can see, you can adjust a lot of these things. For example, for password, you can also do message. Password is required. And for minimum, if I'm not mistaken here, the validation rule, the validation messages, the second option is password should be at least 8 characters long. So we provide this kind of messages here, and it works like this. Let me double check if my form is good. Yeah, I think everything is good here. All right, so this is our basic Zod validation. We just define the schema with Zod, and we send it to the resolver, to our form as a Zod resolver. That's it. The validation is going to apply, and the errors that Zod schema is going to throw on different fields, we can hook into them by getting the errors from the form state, or by getting the field state error on a controller, on one individual field. And we can work with error.message as normally. The next step is having a Zod schema, we can define a type. So having this schema, we can transform it to a TypeScript type. But to do that, we're going to say, hey, the sign in fields is equal to, and to create the type, actually it's not a const, it's going to be a type. We're going to do that using the z.infer, and we're going to infer the type of our schema. If I hover now on the sign in fields, we are going to see that this sign in fields has email, which is required, and password, which is required. If you, for example, go ahead and say that email is going to be string.optional, automatically you're going to see that this email has a question mark. I don't know why I didn't like it, but your optional here. Anyway, it looks at like different rules that you specify here and is going to apply them to the type script here. How can this TypeScript help us? Well, it can help us by taking the sign-in fields and sending to the sign-in methods, because we know that the data is going to be the fields of our form. So instead of any, we can type it with sign-in fields. And now our data here is strictly type. We know that we can access the .email or the .password and so on. So much better for type validation. So I think, if I'm not mistaken, these are most of the things here. So let me do git status, git add, git commit -m, React hook form. And the next, where is it? There is also one thing here that give me one, like maybe 5 minutes to show you like one extra step that we can do to improve a little bit our system. And I say it's improving a little bit. So that's why this step is totally optional. But if you have a little bit of experience with TypeScript, it's going to make a lot of sense, and it's going to add like that extra small benefit for us. Again, the next step is totally optional, so if you don't feel comfortable with what you're gonna see, just watch it and you don't have to implement it yourself. But I'm going to try to explain why we need that. Well, first of all, one of the issues, not huge issues, but what we can improve is when we use the custom input here, we can target different names. For example, name hello. And the problem is that in our form, we specify the schema, so we know that there is no hello field. These kind of things should be, if possible, should be avoidable, not to have typos, for example, emails, and then like not knowing like why it doesn't work. Another thing on the custom input, if I go here, we say that the control is of type any. The control of type any should actually be the control of type control. And inside there we can put any now. Let's make sure to import control from React hook form. And we are going to see, okay, it works. If I take here field values, this is the type of our different fields. So I can replace this one with field values like this. Still doesn't show me an error. Okay, here it is. If I do any, I think it works here, but if I say field values, it says that, hey, these field values like the email and password is not assignable to some field values. Should I get into that? Or should I just say any? I mean, again, this is a disclaimer. This is a little bit advanced, so if you will not be able to follow along, that's totally fine, because as you can see, with simply control any, it also works. And it's not a huge problem. What I want to do is I want to be able to a custom input send information about the schema, the type of the data fields that I'm working with. This way, I will know what fields there are. I will be able to properly type it. I will be able to properly manage it. But in that case, similar to how we send properties to our custom input, we should send a type. The problem is that we cannot send a type through properties. That's not a possibility. Like, we cannot send a type as an object or as a property to a function. However, we can send and we can use the generics feature in JavaScript, and the generics in the custom input will say the following. So it works as T, and we say that T should extend field values, and this T here is going to be a type that we're going to receive from the above. We're going to see it in a second. Or maybe let's go into the app.tsx, and right away where we render a custom input, say that this custom input, this is the name, and here is going to be defining the type that we want to send there. So this is the syntax. It looks a little bit weird, I know, because this is a component, but with these angle brackets right after the name. This is the generic type. I mean the specific type that we want to send to a generic type in the custom input. Now inside the custom input, we're going to receive this as a variable, sign-in fields. We're going to receive it as this T type. Here we do not know what it is, but we know it's going to look something like a field values. What we're going to do with it is we're going to say that this type for our props is also going to have this generic type T that will extend the field values. We're going to take the T from the custom input, we're going to send it down to the type there, so that here we can say, hey, this control is of type T. And this name is strictly a path of type T. And path can be imported from here. And path takes an object and only looks at the different fields. So now everything here works as it was working before. But because now the name, we specify that it's not a normal string, it's a path of the object that you sent us. If I go back in app.tsx and I will make a typo here saying emails, it's going to say, hey, name is not assignable to email or password. Did you mean email? So right away, we have type validation here as well. So again, this is a small thing, but it's also something new that I'm pretty sure most of you didn't know it's possible, and it might be something that someday you're gonna say, damn, like this is how to solve this issue. So it's a way to send a dynamic type from the above, below, and the feature is called using generics. So you can research a little bit more if you're interested in learning it. So now our control here is of that type that we send to our custom input, and everything here works perfectly. And if I don't send these sign-in fields, what's going to happen? Nothing. It's just not going to have. It didn't update it. But I need to send it to different inputs here as well. For example, this name. Why it has email and password here? Because I didn't send anything. That's something that I didn't expect, but maybe my So without sending the generic, the name here says that it should be name or password. Do you mean that I didn't even have to do that? Or it's... But I cannot do any, no. So now it's a string. Is it because it's at the top? Does it infer automatically without even me sending it to it? Because of a control? Because the control has that type? What if I have another... And another thing is that this use form should also be typed with sign-in fields. But what if I would have like another z.object, like another control? Let me just test it. z.string. So if I take form2 and send it to here, form2 dot control, in that case, it's going to know that it can only have a name test. So this is, even if we didn't send the type here, that's a little bit confusing for me. Because it's either some magic that now my brain doesn't understand. I need some oxygen. Or I didn't even need to do the generics. Give me 1 second, I'm going to figure it out. So custom input. What if field values? What if it doesn't have these generics and simply does field values? Field values. Now it doesn't know like what kind of field values. Yeah, so now the control is not okay. If I do here any, in that case it's okay, but the name is going to be a simple string. So field values is good. Yeah, I think I need that T. Okay, so we need the generics, but we don't necessarily need to provide it here like this with this weird stuff. It's most probably going to automatically take it from the control here. So I'm going to move back to the control. And it says because this control does not have a test, so I'm going to go with password. This is something like that, to be honest, I don't fully understand how it automatically detects it, that it should take it from this control, the type. You know what I mean? Because, yeah, I understand if I would send it here to assign in fields, totally makes sense. We send, we specify, it gets here in the T. The T goes down to the props as T. This T goes into the control and the path. The thing is that if I don't do that, it still works. So that's our typed custom input. Do you save this live? Yes, I save the live streams. If you're watching this on our platforms, on Twitter or on Twitch, I also stream on Twitch, it's going to be available on our YouTube channel. Okay, perfect. So now, for now, we are good with our React hook form. And I think we can move on, because the next step is going to be to set up our navigation and already configure like different screens and how the user is going to move through different screens. For the navigation, we're going to use Expo Router. Expo Router is a file-based navigation system. It's built on top of React Navigation, so it shares everything, all the good parts about React Navigations, but it adds one extra layer of abstraction, where we just create simply files and folders, and it automatically creates and sets up the screens for our application. When it comes to authentication, it's important to understand how the authentication and navigation fits together, because we need to make sure that different users, if they already sign in, they are navigated to the home screen. If they get on a screen but they're not signed in, they should be navigated back. And this kind of authentication and navigation is tied together, so it's important to know how to implement this authentication inside Expo Router. So that's what we're going to do in this step. First, let's go ahead, open the Expo docs under the Expo Router installation, and let's scroll down until we see manual installation. And let's go ahead and copy the dependencies that we need to install. Let's do clear here and paste the Expo Router, the Safe Area Context, the React Native screens, the linking, constants, and status bar. After that, we're going to change the entry point inside package.json to Expo Router/entry. So if we go into the package.json, you're going to see main and change it to Expo Router/entry. It's no longer going to be index.tsx after we change it to Expo Router.entry. That's why this index.tsx can easily be deleted. No longer going to be used. Back into the documentation, we need to set the schema inside app.json. I usually like to put it after the slug. We need to set here scheme. This scheme is used for the deep links. So let's say, let's do notjust.dev is going to be our schema, and the URLs to our application is going to start with notjust.dev. If we're developing for web, we can install React Native Web and DOM. Let's go ahead and actually install them, even though we're not sure if we're gonna need them, but just by installing them and making sure that the web bundler is Metro, we're going to have web support as well. So web, I think the bundler here, Metro, is optional because Metro is by default. Yeah, it defaults to Metro. So let's continue, and we don't need to do anything on the Babel config. Only thing that's left to do is to set up the folder where we're gonna keep our screens. Remember I was saying that Expo Router is a file-based navigation system. It will look into a specific folder to find the screens in your application. That specific folder is called app directory, and you can either create it in the root directory or inside the source. I'm going to do it in the source. I'm going to call it app, and I'm going to move my app.tsx inside this app. Now, files inside our app directory are going to are going to be accessible through a link depending on their name. In this case, our file name is called app, so it's going to be accessible at our URL/app. If we want to make it the home screen available when we go to simply slash, we have to rename it to index. And the index screen is going to map to simply slash. Now we're going to have to update a little bit how we import things because we changed the location. So it would be ... and without source like this. Or alternatively, and a better approach would be to go into the tsconfig. This is again optional, but it's going to simplify how we import stuff. And adding in the compiler option here, the base URL and the paths. Paths are a way to create path aliases, or shortcuts to different places in our application. For example, if I start with @ I will mean that I need to look into the source. Or if I will start with assets, I will look into the assets here and stuff like that. Make sure to add them here, is going to help us a lot. Back in our index, I can do here @components, and here I can do @/components. And because we said that is the source directory, it's going to say, hey, go into the source and then components. So this way, when we move files around, we don't have to think about relative paths. We are not going to break it because we are using path aliases. So in other places, I don't think we used anything else. Yeah, that's good. So now that we have up an index, it's time to restart our application. So for me, it even crashed, but we have to do it with npm start -- clear. This -- clear is going to reset the Metro bundler, the Metro cache, and it's quite important when we do these kind of big changes. I have it here on Android. I'm going to also run it on iOS. Come on. What's going on here? Let's do I for running on iOS. Okay, everything looks like it was looking before, but now we have our application managed through Expo Router. I mean the navigation of our application. And yes, at this moment, we do not have a lot of things going on here, but if we don't see any errors, that means that we have configured Expo Router correctly. What I'm going to do is I'm going to do a git commit, say Expo Router installed. And I'm going to follow up by setting different screens that we're going to need in our application. In the app directory, we're going to have our screens. In a normal application, some screens should be protected. Some screens, like the home screen or the profile page, should be only accessible by people that have been authenticated. And then there are screens that, such as sign in, sign up, forget password, that should only be accessible by people that are not yet signed in. For that reason, I recommend the following structure in the app directory. We're going to start with creating a new folder called auth inside normal brackets, and then another folder called protected inside normal brackets. The round parentheses, they mean that this folder is a simple group of screens, but it should not affect the URL. We're going to say that a bit later. In the auth, I'm going to go ahead and say that, hey, there will be a sign-in.tsx screen. There will also be a sign-up.tsx .tsx. If you simply export from here, and in fact, my index has everything related to sign in. So I'm going to copy everything from the index. Actually, I'm going to cut everything and I'm going to move it in the sign in here. In index, let's simply define an index file that is going to return. Let's do a text welcome screen. Let's make sure to import text from React Native. Screen. We can do a style sheet as well. Let's do a view here and put the text inside the view. And make sure you have the title a little bit more exciting. So if I reload, I see welcome screen. Because by default, when we open the application, Expo Router is going to look to the closest index file. The closest index file is here in the root. So this is going to be what's going to render here. To navigate to other screens, we can automatically do that, but I will show you how to do that with links. A normal link imported from Expo Router is very similar to how an A tag works on the web. It's a link that displays some text inside. For example, go to sign in, and it expects the href. The href is the URL that we want to navigate to. Expo Router brings these concepts of URL from the web to mobile, and the URL is going to be made up of folders and file names. For example, to go to sign in, we first have to go to the auth folder. So that's going to be /auth/ and then the sign in name of the file. Sign in. If now I reload, we're going to see the text here, sign in. I'm going to give some gap 20 to make some space. If I press on the sign in, we see that we are navigated to the sign in screen here. And as I was saying, that these parentheses around the auth are there to make this part optional, because this URL will not look good. Even this kind of URL will not look very good. Usually we just want a URL with /signin. So we can simply skip the optional part and just say /signin, and it will still work because we put the auth folder name into the parentheses and it made it optional. In mobile, that's not super valuable, but remember that our application can also run on the web. And on the web, we can go to the sign in, and that's going to be the actual URL at the top there. Perfect. Now in the sign in page, we're going to duplicate, maybe copy paste everything from the sign in. Let's copy paste everything to the sign up page as well. And let's just simply at the moment change the title from sign in to create an account or sign up. If I go to sign in, I would like to have a link below the button. So below the button, or maybe not below the button, below the password, or maybe below the button. Maybe above a button? Or no, let's do it below the button. I don't remember where it usually stays. But I'm going to render a link saying don't have an account, sign up, something like that. And the href here is going to be /sign up. That's the name of the file. Let's make sure that at the top we are importing a link from Expo Router. And you can also give it some styles. Styles.link. And if I go here, I will say link is going to simply have a color of that blue that I can take from our custom button, this blue. So if I go to sign in, I have this, don't have an account. Maybe I will do font weight 600 as well. Don't have an account, sign up. If I press on this one, it says unmatched route. That's sometimes happening when we add new routes, but by simply reloading the application and going and doing that again, it's still that. Because /sign up, export default function. Oh, not sing up, but sign up. That's my bad. If I go sign in and then sign up, we see create an account, which is already the sign up page. Because we copy pasted this stuff, let's take a moment and not forget to update everything here to be specific to sign up schema, to sign up page. First of all, the name of the schema will be sign up schema. We're going to have sign up fields that is going to come from sign up schema. The export default function, let's call it sign up screen. The form is going to work with sign up fields. The Zod resolver is going to work with sign up schema. The on sign up function is going to receive these sign up fields. Let's even console log it, not to be confused. Keyboard avoiding view, that's good. Title, create an account. This I think is good. Password is good. The name is going to be sign up. And handle submit is going to be on sign up. And in these kind of cases, we don't need the status bar because by default, the status bar is going to be handled at the Expo Router level or at a layout level. So I'm going to remove it from here. I'm going to check at the top things that we don't need, like Expo status bar, to keep it really clean. And I'm going to go into the sign in, and the only thing that I want to remove here or change is the name of a function. Again, super optional, but sign in screen. And also I want to remove the status bar here at the bottom. Status bar. Do we want a similar link, don't have an account, sign up, on the sign up form that will say already have an account, already have an account, sign in. And let's import sign in, and let's redirect back to sign in. And styles.link, I'll have it like this. So now if I go to this one, don't have an account, sign up, create an account, already have an account, sign in, I will go back. Perfect. So for now, these are going to be the two forms that we have. Let me go ahead and do git add, git commit -m, expo router, not expo router, but auth screens. And before we continue, let me add inside the protected, let me add a file called index.tsx. And this is going to be basically the home screen, right? Let's do export default home screen. It's going to be the screen that we're going to make sure that only users that are authenticated have access to. Home screen. Let's do style. I'll just add some default styles here. only logged in users can see this. Okay, so we have something on the home screen. Let's go ahead from the index, add another link that will say, hey, go to protected/index. Go to home protected screens. We see a new page. If I press there, we see home screen only logged in users can see this. At the moment, we are not protecting it, but we are kind of implementing the base for it, like we're getting there. In this case, as you can see, we needed to specify protected because if we left it like this, it will target this index at the slash. So being specific when it can be ambiguous, when it can be different screens, is preferred. Okay. Let's go ahead and talk a little bit about layouts. What are layouts? Layouts are shared logic and shared UI between different screens. It's basically a wrapper around a group of screens. Let's go ahead, play with them, and we're going to understand them better. I'm going to start by creating a root layout, and the root layout is the layout from the app directory. The layout has a very specific name, so it must be _layout.tsx. And it should export something. Default function root layout. Let's return null for now. If I do that, we see that we lost everything on the screen. That's because whatever the layout, especially the root layout, is the first file that is going to be executed. For example, we are trying to go on the index screen, but index is inside the app directory, so it first looks for the layout file, renders the layout file, and the layout file is responsible for rendering the screen. Because in the layout we said return null, we stop here. We're not rendering the screen. If we want to get back the functionalities that we had, we need to import slot from Expo Router and render this slot inside our layout. Now we have a screen back. And slot is very similar to the children property, meaning that, hey, if you wanted to go on the index screen, render it here. At the moment, it doesn't make sense. Later, what we can do is we can add stuff above a slot. For example, I'm not going to go into details because, again, this is not Expo Router tutorial. This is an authentication tutorial. So I'm going to stop at the slot, but I'm going to explain why do we need this root layout. Well, we need it because here, if I do console log, we can have some shared logic. Oh, come on. Console.log root layout. Root layout. And we're going to see that when we render a screen, it first goes through the root layout and then only went to the screen. Later, we're going to come back to this layout. But layouts can be at all levels, like every folder can have its own layout. For example, the auth, I'm going to copy paste the root layout in the auth as well. Now, this layout from the auth folder is going to render above the sign in and sign up folder pages. I'm going to rename it to auth layout. Let's say auth layout. And it's also going to be a slot. If I go to sign in, it's going to render both the root layout and then auth layout. So not only this one, but it's going to start from this one, then go in this one, and then only then render the sign in. Also in the layout, and I think here in the auth it makes sense, we can change how do we want to, what kind of navigator do we want for this group of screens. There is a stack, so if instead of slot I render a stack and reload the application, if I'm gonna go to the sign in, we're gonna say that we already have a header and the animation between screens is already better. Like it's not simply replacing it, but it has some animation from left to right. It has back buttons at the top, it has headers and so on. So I think this is much better, and I will leave it like this. Maybe even I will expand the stack, because you can expand it and you can add target here the screens based on their name. So I will target the sign in screen and I will send it some options to say, on the sign in I will not show the header, but on the sign up I will simply change the title, because if I go there, sign up, I'll change the title to sign up. So if I go to sign in, it doesn't have a header. If I go to sign up, it has a header, it has a back button, maybe the title here as well, because it will change the back button if I'm not mistaken. Yes, back to sign in, sign up, back to sign in. Perfect. So in this case, it made sense to change it from a slot to a stack to have like better animations in this case. But anyway, this is our auth layout that is going to be here. And I'm going to do the same for protected, because I'm going to copy the root layout inside the protected folder, and I'm going to rename it to protected layout, and I'm going to leave it as a slot. Again, at this moment, it might not make a lot of sense, but these layouts are very important for our next step. The next step when we are going to guard different parts of our application. Guarding means protecting against different users. So that's going to happen at the layout layer, and I'm going to explain how that's going to work. Usually in Expo Router, that's happening based on two components. One of them is a context provider, or a place from where we can check if a user is currently authenticated or not. It can be a custom context provider, or it can come from an outside tool like Clerk or something else. I'm going to start with a custom React context provider to simplify it a little bit, to explain how it does, and later we're going to see how even more simple using Clerk is going to look like. For now, let's go ahead and create here in a new folder in the source a provider. Providers. Let's create the auth provider.tsx. Let's go ahead and in the auth provider, we're going to say auth context equal to create context. The create context should be imported create context from React. Now we're going to export here a component that is going to be the auth provider that is going to wrap around some components. That's why it's going to receive a children that we can say props with children. And what it's going to do is going to return something, and that something is going to be this auth context.provider that we defined, auth context.provider with some values. And inside this auth context provider is going to put the children. Let's make sure to import props with children as well. So now this is a bare bone context provider. Later we're going to add here some data, but for now let's make sure that we take this auth provider and we wrap it around our whole application. When you hear providers that needs to be accessible at the whole application, think about the root layout, because the root layout is the first and the component that is going to be rendered above everything in your application. So no matter on what screen you're gonna go, the root layout is the first things that are gonna be rendered, and everything is going to be inside this root layout. That's the place where we render the global providers, such as the auth provider that we just defined. So let's import auth provider and let's put it around the slot. By doing that, by putting the auth provider around the slot inside the root layout, whenever we go on any screen, it will first render the auth provider, it will send the slot as a children to auth provider, and in the auth provider, if you go here, we say that the children is rendered inside the auth context, meaning that every screen and every component in our application is going to have access to this provider. And this provider, because it's an auth provider, let's say that it's going to have a couple of things. Let's say is authenticated is going to have, and let's do a sign in. I'm going to define VM as a state, for example, is authenticated, set is authenticated, use state, false. And I'm going to create a dummy function that will say sign in, and when we call this function, I'm going to simply say set is authenticated to true. And maybe a sign out as well, where it's going to say set is authenticated to false. I'm going to export these values for our auth provider, such as is authenticated, sign in, and sign out. Sign out, let's add it here as well. So at this point, I'm still not implementing like the logic of authentication, because as I said, like we're going to implement the logic of authentication in the next step. Now I'm only simulating this authentication, and this is going to allow me to focus on teaching you how to work with Expo Router to protect your screens. Because in a lot of cases, you're going to have something like this, a auth provider, where you're going to have some state about the user, if it's authenticated or not, about the session. You're going to have logic of how to handle a sign in, the sign up, the sign out, and so on. Now that we have this auth context provider, whenever I have a context, I really like to export a helper hook with a specific name, like let's say use auth, is going to be a hook that is going to wrap around use context of context. This use context is coming from React, and use of is a simple shortcut to this one. Not a huge deal, but it simplifies a lot and makes it easier to consume our authentication context. Where do we need our authentication context? Well, first of all, let's go ahead and at the index, up index, where we have this, let's call it welcome screen. Here we can take and see what's going to be, const something equal. Let's use this hook use of that we just created in the auth provider. And let's do is authenticated and maybe even the sign out. Let's take this is authenticated and render it as a text saying that if is authenticated, we will say authenticated and not authenticated. Maybe I can add even a button sign out that will call this sign out. So we see that at the moment the user is not authenticated. Let's go ahead in our sign in page. And when we call this on sign in, let's say that we are going to call sign in from use of. As simple as that. So now if I go to the go to sign in and press the sign in button, ABC, and if I press the sign in button And somehow I need to go back to the index, which from here I cannot do. Maybe after sign in I can do router.replace. And this router is coming from Expo Router as well. So if I press sign in, I'm back to the home screen, and now I see the authenticated here. Meaning that when I called the sign in from our provider, the provider updated the field or did its thing, and now the is authenticated became true. And we see it here in action. Meaning that now, as authenticated, I should be able to go to protected screens. In fact, if I reload and I'm not authenticated, I still can go there. This is where guarding comes into play. The first component for us is done. It's a context or a place from where we can understand if a user is authenticated or not. The second one is going to be guarding. Guarding means protecting groups of screens. I'm going to start with this layout from the protected folder, because this layout is supposed to protect all the screens inside this folder from users who are not authenticated. To do that, we are going to get the is authenticated from the use of, and we're going to check if the user is not authenticated, he should not be here. So return a redirect, which is a component from Expo Router, and we are going to redirect him to the /signin. Let's see that in action. If I press now and go to protected screens, I end up on the sign in, because I'm trying to go to the protected screens, but first it's going to render the layout. It's going to see that I'm not authenticated, and I'm going to simply redirect instead of rendering the screen. And I end up here on the sign in. Now on the layout of the off screen, I should do the same, but I should say get me is authenticated from the use of from our provider. And if the user is authenticated, I should not be on any off screens like sign in, sign up, because that can lead to errors. So return, redirect, and we can redirect href back to the / maybe to the welcome screen or to the home screen if you want. So with this, if I'm going to say go to sign in, and if I'm going to actually sign in, we go back to the welcome screen, and I can go easily to protected because now I'm signed in. But if I'm signed in and I press again go to sign in, as you can see I cannot go there because the auth has a layout that is guarding against users who are already signed in, and protected is doing the same for users. If I press sign out, not authenticated, I cannot go to protected. I'm going to be redirected to the sign in screen. So this is, guys, how we are implementing this protecting. And because the layout is going to be rendered when going to any screen in this folder. So it's basically the component that is guarding, that is protecting the entry in this folder. So any screen, no matter how deep, it can be like a subfolder here, like tabs and their index. So no matter how deep, it's going to go through all the layouts from the top to this one and to more specific until it reaches the screen. So that's why this way we are sure that even if someone is going to try with a deep link to navigate there, or on the web to go to /protected, they are not going to be allowed to do that. This is happening on the layout in any time we go to a screen. Perfect. And just because we have here in the layout this navigation away, in the sign-in, we no longer have to do router.replace. That's why I initially didn't have it, because router.replace, like, we should not handle that manually. It should be handled at the layout level. So even if we don't do router.replace, it will automatically happen from the layout. Sign in, we are automatically redirected. Go to sign in, we cannot go there. So that's, guys, how we can protect things. Git status, git expo router authentication. Is naming a screen index necessary for every new layout file created? No, it is not. Index, how to explain it? For example, if I would create here home, maybe not a home, but if I create a folder for settings, right? Somewhere here, let's do folder settings. And if I would create here another folder here, let's say settings.tsx, the URL of this settings, export default settings, the URL is going to become /settings from the folder /settings. And I can show you that easily on the web. Oh, come on. If I run this one on the web, and if I go to /settings, it's going to say 404 unmatched route. But if I go to /settings/settings, we are going to go to the settings. But maybe you don't want the second settings. So how to skip the second settings? In that case, you can do index. And index basically means it's the root file when we go to this folder. In a way, it's like skipping the part in the URL. So now we can simply go to /settings, and it's going to render the index there. If I go to /settings/index, it's going to say unmatched route. So index is the first file that is going to be rendered when we simply navigate to a folder, and it's going to look for the index. It's a concept coming from HTML. Like HTML, you have an index file in a folder, so when you navigate to that folder, it's going to pick up the index file. So it's purely like how you want. Like, no, you don't have to have it, but it's for convenience because usually you want it. You want that URL to have something, to not have extra things. But again, you don't have to. That's, for example, in the auth, as you can see, we do not have index. In the auth, we have sign in and sign up. Totally fine. I brought the water, but I forgot it. Give me a second. Okay, dokie. Let me just cover one more pattern that a lot of people are getting into through this kind of navigation, especially when you want to automatically redirect the user to the home screen if he's already signed in. So by, in a way, skipping the whole index file here at the top, I'm going to replace it with welcome just for a second, and that is going to make Expo Router, you know what do? It's going to look for the first index file. Because in the auth there is no index file, it's going to go in the protected, and it's going to find index file, this one. It's going to try to go there, but because it cannot, because in the layout it's going to be redirected to the sign in, we land here. So usually what happens in our providers is you store or you get the information whether the user is signed in or not from some kind of async calls. Either you're reading it from the storage, which is an async call that takes some time, or you're fetching it from the server, or you're validating some data and so on. So is authenticated false initially? It's actually better to say is authenticated is undefined, which means that I don't know if it's false or if it's true or false. And I'm going to say that it's either string or Boolean. Or undefined. So actually the is authenticated have three states. Either I don't know if it's authenticated or not, I know that he's not authenticated, and I know that he is authenticated. So initially it should be undefined because we don't know. In a use effect, maybe you're going to have like check off, which is going to be an async function. I'm going to simulate. Let's do simulate the loading state of 2 seconds. Let's do that. Set authentication is false. Or maybe, yeah, if I do that, if I reload, I'm automatically going to the sign in. But what if check off is going to say that the user is actually already authenticated? And I'm going to say eventually after 2 seconds is going to become true. I'm trying to simulate a situation where the user opened the application, signed in, used the application, closed the application, and tomorrow he's opening it again, and you already have his information somewhere in the storage, usually in the storage. So you need to read it, but that is an asynchronous call. So after a bit of time, like let's say a couple of milliseconds, you say, okay, I read it, I know that he's authenticated, I need to redirect to the home screen. Look what's happening in this case if we do not take into consideration this situation. If I reload the application, I'm not doing anything. As you can see, we are redirected to the sign-in screen. And after that, after 2 seconds, we are redirected back to the home screen. So visually, you get this flickering, which is not bad in terms of in terms of security. You're still not allowing people on the home screen if you're not sure that they are authenticated. But visually, it's a little bit bad because you're going to have this flicker of navigating between two screens, between sign in when you're not sure and then when you're sure, navigating back. So you are either going to have the is loading state and simply, or you're going to handle this undefined properly. What the easiest way to do is here, before rendering anything, I'm going to say if is authenticated equal to undefined, let's return an activity indicator, which is a loading a spinner imported from React Native. So that means that if is authenticated is undefined, we are not sure yet, we are loading. So if we are still loading, simply stop here and only then go down. Now if I'm going to reload, it's at the top. Maybe better would be like this. A view style. Come on, what's going on here? Yeah, let's do it like this. So now if I reload, we see a loading indicator, and after 3 seconds, we are automatically on the home screen. So there is not that weird flickers or redirecting between screens, meaning that, hey, the auth provider is still not sure where the user should be. It's loading. While it's loading, you can have also a is loading state. While it's loading, don't render children. This will prevent rendering anything in our application because we know that this auth provider is rendered at the root layer. So render activity indicator, and only later you know that authenticated is, if it's not undefined, because it didn't stop here, In this case, is authenticated is either true or false, meaning that I'm either sure that he's authenticated or I'm either sure that he's not authenticated. And in this case, the navigation is going to work way, way better. Okay, perfect. I'm going to bring it to 300 milliseconds, a more realistic one. So you're going to see it for a second and then it's going to go away. Perfect. This is another concept that I could skip, but it's super important. Authentication loading state. But I see a lot of students in our academy struggle with this issue, very common issue of being like redirected back and forth between multiple screens. What plugin do you use to generate the code to simulate with a prompt? This one here, this is part of Cursor. Not sure if I pronounce it correctly, but it's cursor.com. It's an editor, like a code editor, that is a fork of Visual Studio Code that provides these AI features. Okay, so let me check. I think we are good with Expo Router. Do I go back to the welcome being index? Maybe to have index like this place where I can navigate between different screens. It's very temporary. We're gonna think like what we needed, what we would do with it, but it's not the focus. The focus is authentication and protecting of screens. Can we go into a bit more depth on authentication context? What exactly do you want to go more in depth here? I didn't plan because in the next step, I'm going to show you how to integrate Clerk in our application, so you don't have to handle this authentication context yourself. We are not going to need it at all. Okie dokie. So yeah, I think so far we are good. The next step is going to be to integrate Clerk in our application. Clerk is the best way to integrate authentication, I mean the logic of authentication in the application, without wasting a lot of time in implementing the logic and the backend and the security of it yourself. Authentication is something that you need in any kind of application, and I like to recommend founders and people who are working on their own apps not to waste time on things that have already been built, such as authentication, storage, security, and so on. Go ahead, use some tools that are already there and focus your time on building the features. And authentication is something that, to get started, it's super easy to do it yourself, but to implement everything and to make sure that it's secure, it's scalable, it covers all the edge cases, it has like different integrations with social sign-ins. To get all of that done, like it's super complicated task. So that's why using Clerk is going to simplify and make your life way, way easier. You're gonna see that in a second. Make sure to open the description of the video, and let's go ahead and press on this link to open up Clerk documentation for Expo guide. We're going to go ahead and make sure we are going to start by installing Clerk in our application. Let's go ahead and do npm install at Clerk Expo in our application here. And the next one is going to be to set our Clerk API key. For that, we need to create an account. So go ahead and create an account on Clerk. I already have one. Super easy to connect. You can even log in with GitHub. And they have a very good free tier. If I'm not mistaken, where is it? Clerk.com. The free tier is up to 10,000 monthly active users, and it's going to be completely free. So let's go ahead in our dashboard, and I'm going to create a new application. Let's call it React Native Authentication. Maybe I'm going to even add spaces. Let's do it RN Authentication. Here we can enable what sign-in options we want by default. I'm going to leave email and Google by default, but we can always change this in the dashboard. So let's just simply do create application. Just like that, our application is ready and we are ready to sign in users. Go ahead in the configure, and under developers, you're going to see API keys. And here in the API keys, you can select even here, where is it? Expo. And the Expo variable name and the key is here. So we can simply copy, go back in our application, create the .env file, and paste our expo _public _clerk publishable key with our key from Clerk. After we add it here, make sure that we go into the git ignore and we add this .env file inside the git ignore. We don't want to commit the .env to the repository. Now let's go back to the documentation, and the next step is going to be to import the Clerk provider, and the Clerk provider is going to be at the root level, like the highest in our tree. For that, think about the root layout inside up _ layout, not auth layout, not protected layout. It should be up layout. And here we're going to import Clerk provider. Similar to how we had our own auth provider, we are going to have the Clerk provider. Like this. By default, Clerk provider is going to look to a variable with this name, expo public Clerk publishable key, but you can also send it like this as publishable key if you rename it something else. But I'm going to remove because it's cleaner, it automatically looks for that. The next step is going to configure the token cache. For features like remembering the user session so he doesn't have to sign in every time he opens the application, Clerk should write some data on that device. On browser or on web, that's happening like in session or in the session data. On mobile, usually this happens on the storage of the device. You can use a normal async storage for that, but it's advisable to use Expo Secure Store. That is also going to encrypt this data, adding some more security to your application. So let's go ahead and install npm install Expo Secure Store in our application here. And what we should do is we should take the token cache from Clerk Expo token cache, and we're going to take this token cache and give it to the Clerk provider like this. Now the Clerk provider is going to use the Expo Secure Store to write the data about the sessions and so on. Yeah, the next step is going to be the sign in and sign up pages. But let's reload our application because we see that missing publishable key. That means that we need to simply reload the server so that the new .env file will be loaded. And if I do reload now, we are going to have everything working as it was working before. If I go to sign in, I cannot because why? Because I'm authenticated, but I don't know from where. Where I'm authenticated from? Use auth provider. Oh, it's yeah, I see. It's this auth provider from here. I'll set it to false here. In a second, we're going to get rid of our custom implementation of auth provider because we are going to start using Clerk to manage our users. And the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to go to the sign in and to the sign up. I'm going to explain like why do we have this box here in a second, where we're going to fix it, but let's ignore it for a second. I'm going to go to the creating an account, and this is the first place that we need to implement. We need to implement the sign up. Or if we want to follow the guide, we are going to implement the guarding, because the guarding is going to happen at the layout pages. If we go, for example, on the protected layout, instead of taking this is authenticated from our custom use of, we're going to import use of from Clerk Expo, and we're going to get the is signed in from use of from Clerk. Now I'm going to use this is sign in here. Now I don't need at this place my custom implementation. I'm going to switch to using Clerk. Much simpler. I'm going to do the same at the auth layout level. Instead of use of from here, I'm going to do import use of from Clerk. That value is going to be is signed in, and I'm going to use it here. So we're going to see that if I'm going to try now to go to protected screen, I'm going to land on the sign in. Same thing as before, it checks in the layout and protects and redirects. Nice. Maybe I'm going to make sure to get rid of the whole sign in. So from sign in, use of, let's remove it. Let's remove it from here and from here. And that means that most probably I'm safe to go at the root layout and delete the whole auth provider from here. I no longer need it. I'm going to use Clerk provider. And yeah, let's remove the whole provider. Let me double check if everything is working. Go to sign in. Perfect. Go to sign up. Here we are on the create page. Let's go back to the documentation. So here in the layout, we see the auth layout. We implemented that. Let's go ahead and follow up with a sign up page. This is the code for the sign up page. And what we need mostly is this on sign up pressed. I'm going to open it on the side, and I will explain it step by step what we are doing without copy pasting a lot. And this will allow me to explain you like how things are working. Let me put it here. So let's go ahead in our auth sign up, and let's start implementing the logic of signing the user up. That logic is going to happen here on sign up, because here we know that that data is already valid. The data is going to have the email and password, and we should already start using Clerk to actually sign up the user. Okay, what we need is a hook import use sign up from Clerk Expo. With this hook, we're going to get some, we're going to interact with sign use sign up. One thing that we're going to get here is the actual sign up function. To do that, to start the signing up process, we're going to call await sign up, and here we're going to send the email address, the data email address, and for the password, we're going to send data.password. Because this is a wait, we need the onSignup function to make it async, like this. And the sign up, what's happening here? Use sign up, signup.create, sorry. .create, like this. Sign up is possibly null. Why is it possibly null? Because it can be in the loading state. So the use sign up has this is loaded, because while it's not loaded, we should not be able to sign up. What I'm going to do is I'm going to set if is not loaded, don't do anything, just simply wait a bit. And only after loaded, sign up is going to become valid like this. So let's see what's going to happen here. Maybe I'm also going to put it into a try catch, because the sign up can throw errors such as, I don't know, the account already exists or something like that. So let's just do console log sign up error. If I'm going to go here, I'm going to go to sign in and then sign up. I'm going to say my email. And here I'm going to provide a very basic password, 123, 123, 123. If I do sign up, we see sign up error. Error, password has been found in an online data breach. For account safety, please use a different password. That's something that Clerk is handling. Common passwords from data breaches. Okay, I'm going to do something else. If I do sign up, we don't see any errors. But does it mean that we are ready? Well, no, because if I look in the users, we see that the user is not yet created. Because in the configure, if we look at our email, phone, and username in the email address, we're going to see that that we have to verify at sign up. Require users to verify their email address before they can sign up. Not verifying email addresses may result in low quality email addresses in your database. So there is one way to disable this one. Press continue and then press save here. And in that case, we're going to be able to sign up like that. Sign in, sign up. Let's do OID, notjust.dev. Copy, paste, sign up. So now if we look here in the users, we're going to see that the user has been created. But this is not the best way. Maybe, yeah, like let me think about this for a second, but I think we're gonna get back to it because I want to also show you how to validate emails with email code. So I'm going to get back to it, but first I want to go to the sign in. to the sign in page and show you how we can sign in existing users. Let's go ahead and open sign in. And here in the sign in, after the data is validated, we are going to go into the we're going to have to handle the logic with Clerk as well. So for that, we're going to import a hook called useSignIn from Clerk. At the top, we're going to get from the useSignIn, useSignIn. Again, the sign in, and the is loaded. When we call our function here after the data has been validated, we can check if is not yet loaded, then simply return, don't do anything. Our function is going to be async because in the next step, we're going to try to log in. So let's add the try and catch block. Console log sign in error. And here, let's go ahead and do await. Come on, await. Sign in. And we need to provide some data about the user. The data such as the identifiers? Oh, it's sign in dot create. And the data is identifier. Sign in is already not only going to work with emails. It's going to work with identifiers. Identifiers can be either emails, it can be phone numbers, it can be usernames, and so on. In our case, it's going to be data.email. And in our case, it's also going to need a password, which is going to be data.password. We're going to get this result back as sign in attempt. And let's check what's going to be this console log, this sign in attempt. If I go into the logs and try to sign in with my account, I lost my styles. This usually happens. I'm going to copy everything and I'm going to do Ctrl-Z a lot of times until my styles are back, and I'm going to paste everything back. Now if I go to sign in and try to log in with the same account as I already have, but as you can see, I cannot go there as I'm already logged in. Let me check the sign out button, how it works at the moment, because in the index we have the sign out. I don't know why it didn't give me an error, but this use of should be imported from Clerk Expo, and it has the sign out button. Is signed in. I can do the same here. And when we press sign out, I'm going to call sign out from the Clerk. So let's reload. Now I see authenticated and I can press sign out and it's going to be not authenticated, and I can go back to the sign in page. If here I'm going to try to do vadim at notjust.dev with the same password and do sign in. If I'm going to look here at the data, it's going to be what? Sign in attempt. Most probably I'm interested in the .status. So if I do status, we see verified or status complete here. This is the status I want, status complete, the status of attempt. So in the sign in, I'm going to check here if sign in attempt dot status is equal to complete. That means that the sign in has been successful. If not, there needs to be like something else, maybe verifying account, maybe multi-factor authentication, or so on. So what do I need to do is, if it's successful, I need to update and make sure to let Clerk know that this is going to be the current session that we want to use. Because as you can see, it didn't automatically redirect me, even though if I reload the application, it's going to say that it's authenticated. And I need to go back here. What I need to do is say that, hey, in the eSign-in, I can get a function set active. And if I know that the sign-in is successful, I can go ahead and set the active session with a sign-in attempt.created session ID. And now if I'm going to try to log in, it's going to automatically redirect me because it's going to update in Clerk context the active session, and I can no longer go back there. So this is the set active here. Okay, we're gonna get back into some more error management in a second. For now, what do I want to do? Okay, for now, let me go ahead and do git add, git commit -m, Clerk Integration. The next step, I want to actually implement properly email validation. I'm going to go into the configure. I'm going to go email, phone, and username, and the settings of the email address. I'm going to require the user to verify his email. This is a very common thing to do in a lot of applications. You don't want someone to sign in with a random email. You want them to verify their email. And that usually happens by sending them a code to that email and then validating that code. Well, the good news is that we don't have to implement the logic of sending the code, of generating the code and validating it. We just have to integrate the user interface, and with Clerk is going to take care of the rest. So let's do continue and save here. And let's go back in our authentication, and we're going to create another page by duplicating the sign up. Let's call it email or verify. Let's do verify. In the verify, it's going to be a screen where we're going to put the code that we received on our email. So let's go into the verify and top to bottom update things that we need to change here. The schema is not going to be sign up schema, is going to be verify schema. It's not going to have email and password. It's simply going to have, it's not going to have password. It's going to have a code, and the code is not going to be an email. Code is required. You can even specify the length. It should be length 6 invalid code. So this way we're going to enforce 6-digit code on the verify schema. Then the verify fields are going to be infer from schema. The screen is going to be called verify screen. The handle submit OK is going to work with verify fields. Resolver with schema. On sign up here is going to say, first of all, the data is going to be verify fields. Now let's do, come on, on verify. And everything inside I'm going to remove, because we're going to have like a completely different implementation of what should happen when we press it. And maybe here as well, I'm going to comment it out for a second. I'm gonna go next saying like updating the fields, like verify your email. You can even add a subtitle explaining what's happening. And here in the custom input, the control, it says that we cannot have a name here. It should be a code placeholder 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Autofocus, auto capitalization, keyboard type. Keyboard type can be number. Autocomplete like this. Maybe here autocomplete can be, let me check something. Here, if I do autocomplete one-time code, this is going to autocomplete that field when you receive the code through the SMS. I'm not sure if it's going to do the same for email. I'm not sure if that's how it happens on iOS, for example. But it's good to have it here, one-time code. Custom input, the second one, I don't need it. Maybe not even the view here. The custom button is verify. And on handle submit on verify. We lost the styles. This link, I don't think we need it. So because I lost the styles, I'm going to do Ctrl Z a bit until I find them and paste them again. Okay, so I think we handled most of the stuff here. Back on sign up, we need to navigate there after we sign up the user. That's going to happen in this on sign up function. After we do the sign up, what we're going to do is we're going to do router.push verify. So let's go ahead and try it again. I'm going to sign out, make sure not authenticated, go to sign in. I'll go to create an account and I will start by filling in the name, my email, I'm going to do sign up and I should be redirected to the verify, but I forgot to reload. So let me, where is it? Here, reload. Sign in. Let's go here. Sign up. And I'm redirected to the verify. And here, I need to put in the code that I should already have it on my email. Let me double check my email. Make sure I'm on my current account. Let me double check my inbox. Yeah, there is one more step that I didn't do. Simply doing sign up is not going to send me email. After I do the sign up and before I do redirect to navigate, I should do one more step. I should do await sign up dot prepare verification, and the strategy is going to be email code, meaning start the verification process by sending an email code. And only then redirect to the verify. So if I go back here and do sign up, it's going to do prepare verification, and now I should receive the email. Indeed, I received it. It looks very good. It looks good. So I will take this code and I will add it here. but I didn't implement in the verify the logic of what should happen when we press verify. What should happen there is one second. Sign up attempt. Okay, so it's the same sign up. So it's the same hook, sign up. We're going to check in the verify. If loaded, we're going to stop there. Then we're going to put it into a try catch. The error, console log, verify error. What are we going to do here is we have a code, we need to start verifying. So I'm going to do const sign up attempt equal await sign up dot attempt email address verification, and here in the parameters we're going to have to provide the code that we can take from data.code. And by the way, to simplify it, I will destructure the code from the data so I can simplify it to this. Now, similar to how it happened for us on the sign in, we can check if sign up attempt dot status is equal to complete. That means that that's it. We can set the current active session to this one. That means that email, the account was created, it was verified, and we can set active. I don't know, my cursor doesn't want to indent things correctly. And the session is going to be sign up attempt created session ID. If it's not complete, the status of an attempt, then there might be, we need to check console log sign in attempt, because either the code was wrong or something else happened. User might need to take extra actions. So if I have this one, and I hope it already is implemented here, I can go ahead and try to add a bad code. If I do that and do verify, we see verify error, incorrect code. If, however, I'm going to do a good code, 906.960 verify, we see that everything is good. We are authenticated. We have access to the protected screens. If I reload, I'm authenticated and everything is perfect. And in my users, the users with this email already has the email verified and is primary. This one, the email address is not verified. So I can simply remove the previous one. Now, if a user creates an account, we know that he verified his email. Good. So sign in is good, sign up is good. Let me do git add git commit -m verify email. Before I move on to other sign-in methods, I want to handle a little bit the errors. For example, I'm going to start maybe with a sign-in form, and then we're going to implement it everywhere. I'm going to sign out, not authenticated, and go to sign in. First of all, let's, for a second, what's this thing here? Well, I believe, I don't know, to be honest, but I know where it's coming from. It's from a custom input, and maybe for you it's not happening anymore. but it's coming from this text that has nothing here. Because look, if without doing anything, if I force a reload, it disappears. And it's rendering only once because I have a text with empty under here and under here. So it's super weird behavior that I'm pretty sure, and it appeared as you saw after we added Expo Router. So I'm not sure where it's coming from. Might be related to the new architecture, and most probably is going to be fixed. Later. Well, the fix is not going to be very nice. Like, I'm not going to like it very much, but let's do it. The fix is going to be to go back to this if error question mark, if only if error, render the error message. And instead of otherwise rendering null, let's render a view that has the same height as our text here. So height, let's say, I don't know, 16. So if I go to sign in, it's going to be rendering this view. If I'm going to render this one, it's going to render this text. And to make sure that they are exactly the same height, I'm going to give to the error the same height 16. So now it should not have any flickers, and that error should be fixed. Again, this fix, like, it shouldn't happen. Like it should work properly. Also, might be only in development, but just to make sure that we don't see it, I went with this fix. Okay, perfect. What I wanted to do here is to properly, in the auth sign in, handle the errors that we're going to get from Clerk. Because wait, here in the error, if I'm going to go ahead and do json.stringify error to properly see it, let's see what's going to happen. I don't need this console log of sign-in attempt. Let's clear and let's try, I don't know, something like this. Sign in. And what do we see? We see the errors has errors, and it has a param name identifier. Identifier means that it couldn't find your account. I think a very basic way would be to say, hey, alert, dot alert, sign in failed, please try again. And if I do that, it's going to show it like this. I don't like that. Another way would be to add like some error handling and so on. But a better way would be to handle the errors also on the form side. Because on the form, we can go ahead and do set error. And this is a function that we can manually set errors on our form. For example, I'm going to show how it works. If I do set error on a field that is called email, with a message invalid email or password, look what's going to happen if I press sign in. Well, I need to have an email here. If I do sign in, it's going to populate it with this email, invalid email or password. So this is how we can set errors on specific fields. We can do this by checking, first of all, we can check if this error is actually a Clerk error. Because it might be something else, it might be network error or so on. But a Clerk error will have specific data. So we can do if is Clerk API response error. That means that we can do that. Else, I don't know, alert sign in failed. Something bad happened, but it's not a Clerk error. This is Clerk API response error is a function imported from Clerk Expo at the top. And having a Clerk error we can take the message, for example, here from error dot errors at position 0 dot long message. Remember, errors is an array. So maybe the error is going to be on different fields. That's one way. Long message, invalid email or password. If I'm going to do it again, we see that the couldn't find your account is actually coming from Clerk, the long message of this error here. But I don't want to take it like this. What I'm going to do is I'm going to say, hey, let's go ahead and loop through all the errors dot for each, and for each error, let's decide what do we want to do with it, because it can be error on both fields. I'm going to do set error, email, and this message. On what field do we set the email? We can understand based on this meta param name. So in this case is identifier. That means that it's on this field identifier. If it's password, it's going to be on the password field. So what I would like to do is I would like to create somewhere here at the top a clerk error to form field. This is going to be an object that we're going to map from names in Clerk, such as identifier, to the field names like this email. And then password is going to map to password here. Now I can take this clerk error to email field. And I will set where it is. Where we do the set error, instead of email, I'm going to set clerk error to form field, and I'm going to access error dot meta dot identifier. And this can be also undefined, not identifiers, dot param name. Let's do it like this. So now if I do that, couldn't find account, but if I'm going to provide the proper account, notjust.dev, I'm going to get the error on the second field. Password is incorrect. Try again or use another method. And if I only do everything correctly, it's going to work. So this is how we are going to do it. Maybe I'm going to switch it a little bit from this map to an actual function. Map clerk error to form field. We're going to get an error. Let's do of type any for a second. And we're going to have a switch case here. Switch error dot meta dot param name. So if case is identifier, return email. If case password, return password. Default, don't return null, but return root. And I'm going to show you why do we need that. And I don't need this one here because I'm going to use this map. And I'm going to say, hey, const for field name is going to be map using this error. Field name. Oh, and here, wait a second, it should be errors at position 0 long message. It should be error.long message. Okay, so now this field is coming from there, but the benefit is here now that if it's not one of these, it's going to default to root. And root is something that is okay for the use form, because if I'm going to go ahead and say, hey, give me that form state with errors, and if I'm going to do console log errors, going to sign in page and simulating an error, we're going to see errors on email field. Perfectly fine. Maybe I will do here JSON stringify so we can see it even better. So errors on the email field. But what is if there is an error on something else, like too many attempts, or server is down, or things like that that are not on specific fields? In that case, we can have errors on the root itself. I'm going to simulate that by commenting out this case with identifier. And we're going to see that if I do that now, we see that the errors has a root property, which means that there is an error on the whole form, not on a specific field. So what I want to do is I want to make sure that we handle these cases as well. And I will say that, hey, below, maybe above a custom button, I'm going to check if errors.root, and you can see even TypeScript has like either email, password, or root, these three values. Email, password are fields, root is the whole field. So if root it has an error, I'm going to display here a text with errors.root.message. And this one is going to be style, color, crimson. You're going to see that now if I go there and do sign in, yeah, this one, I need to simulate a clerk error. If I do sign in, we see couldn't find your account, an error appearing here. This is good because this is, and maybe it should be inside here form. Yeah, that's better. Couldn't find your account. So these root errors are going to be added if we cannot map it from clerk to a specific field. If it's a general error, it's going to go into the root and it's going to still be displayed here, providing a good user experience, because anything that happens is going to be displayed to the user. And the same thing we could do where here in the else, I think it would be a good thing to do set error on the root, saying that message unknown error. Because if we get into this cache, that means that something bad happened. And if it's not a Clerk API response error, then there is something happened. So we can provide actually some information here. And I'm going to do the same set error on the root when the sign-in attempt is not complete. Sign in could not be completed. However, double check this one with a console log, because in some cases this might not be an error. It simply means that it's not yet finished when the user has to do additional stuff, like multi-factor authentication or resolve some captchas, or he has to do something more. So make sure to console log and see what actions you have to do next. And that's the error validation here. Let's go ahead and do the same thing on the sign up. So I'm going to look back into the sign in and see what do we need to do. Well, first we are going to need this map clerk error to form fields on the sign up as well. And I duplicated because in this case, the field is email address. It's not identifier. So email address. Maybe I can have one reusable, and I think it would be even better, but I'll keep it like this for now. And similar to how in sign in we have, we need to get access from our use form to the errors, to the set error, and also to the form state error. And using this set error, similar to how we did in sign in, when we have a clerk error, let's copy it like this, add it in the catch of our sign up here. So we try. If we fail, let's do if is clerk API response error. Make sure to import it from clerk. Let's call it ERR to keep it consistent. We're going to loop through them. We're going to try to understand if it's a field or it's a root, and we're going to set it on the form. Otherwise, we're going to simply set it on the root unknown error. And similar to this, we can do, I don't think we need to do anything here because we are not yet finished. I'll remove this console log. And finally, rendering these general root errors on the form below somewhere there. So custom button, maybe here, yep. So now this error validation should happen here as well. If I'm going to try to sign in with, to sign up with the same email that I already have, if I do sign up, we see password has been found in online data breach for that email address is taken. Please try another one. Why is it both here? Set error. Wait a second. What's happening here? Root field name. If I do console log field name, oh, why? Go to sign in, sign up. I'm going to simulate two errors by using the same email and by using a very simple password. Sign up, field name root, and password. It shouldn't be root. Field name. Email address, return email. Maybe it's, oh yeah, it's definitely not email address with capital. We can check that by doing console log error, and we're gonna see that the error, this is for the password. If I loop above, the param name is email underscore address. So that's the problem. Here in the map clerk error to this one, I'm going to do email underscore address with lowercase. And if I do sign up, now the errors are displayed correctly. And the problem is that in the custom input, this text is going over. In the error, let's go ahead and say, is it text wrap? Maybe not. Let me check if I do flex 1. For the error, I will do multi-line. If I do number of lines 2, it still stops there. Oh, it's because the error has a height. Maybe I'll have minimum height for the error. And I don't think I need number of lines here. Yeah, so instead of height, I change it to minimum height. I think it's good. I'll do minimum height 18 and here height 18, just to make sure that it's a little bit larger than the actual text. Okay, so on the sign up, we also have these errors properly displayed. Lastly, we need the same thing on the verify. So on the verify, we're going to need the same at the top. Map clerk error to form field. In this case, we are only going to have, I think, the code, and it's going to be actually code, so nothing crazy. From the use form, let's get the set error and form state errors. In this on verify, in the catch, we're going to do the same. In the catch, we're going to do if clerk error and so on. Let's import this clerk API response error. We're going to map it and we're going to set it in state, otherwise in the root. And also here we have this else, which we should probably handle it properly with at the root level. Let's do message is going to be could not complete the sign up. So if I try to do another email, like I don't know, Vadim1, and then do some random email, go here, if I just press verify, this is going to be simple front-end verification. If I do 123, 123, verify, we see incorrect code that is coming from clerk, and we properly displayed. Perfect. Look, another thing that I forgot to add, a very simple thing, but that adds a little bit of better UI. On the custom input, what I want to do is, if there is an error, I want to make the border also crimson, red. So I'm going to add here one more extra style, saying that if error, or let's do here the border color, is going to depend on whether there is error, it's going to be crimson. Otherwise, it's going to be gray. So now if I go to sign in, and I do that, when there is an error, the border color is going to be crimson there as well, indicating that, hey, there is an error. And if I start typing, it goes away. Whew, perfect. Now we have here git status. Clerk error validation or clerk error management. Perfect. Why use Clerk over Supabase? I saw that question more often. The simple answer is that Clerk is specialized in authentication and user management. So with Clerk, you can easily integrate it in without depending on any backend provider. So no matter if you're using Supabase, you can still integrate Clerk. If you're using a custom Node.js backend, if you're using something else, and so on. So in a way, it decouples the being tied to a specific provider like Supabase or like something like that, and separates like the backend logic from the user management logic. And because they are specialized in authentication, they provide some additional features that other backend as a server solutions do not offer, or that are way easier to do in Clerk compared to others. Here I'm talking about like just looking in the configure the things that you can integrate with. For example, on the single sign-on connection, which we're going to do in a second, if I do add connection, you're going to see that there are more than 24 providers, such as Google, Facebook, Twitter, Microsoft, Discord, Spotify, like Coinbase, like anything here. You can also integrate custom providers. You can also integrate Web3 sign up like MetaMask and so on. You can have multi-factor authentication, attack protections, templates, and so on. So this is the reason. However, if you're purely working with Supabase and you need the simple authentication system, I think using the Supabase authentication system is totally fine as well. So using Clerk over Supabase is just going for better features, better DX when it comes to authentication. And it also supports different, like it doesn't depend on any backend. Okay, so let's see. I think the next step is going to see how we can add sign-in, social sign-ins, right? We don't have a lot of time left. So let's go ahead and see how we can add sign-in with Google and with other providers. For that, in the documentation, where it is. Well, let's go ahead and I'm going to show you how to do it like step by step. Let's go ahead in the components and create a new button called sign in with, and let's do TSX. Let's do export default sign in with, and let's render there, I don't know, maybe a custom button, which is our custom component, that will say sign in with Google. Const on press, something like that. Now let's go ahead and render this sign in with in our authentication sign in. Maybe even below we don't have an account. Let's do here sign in with. Let's make sure to import it from our components. And if I go to sign in, we're going to have this sign in with Google. Later, we're going to figure out like the design of it, but for now, like it's good like this. Here in the sign in with, we're going to have to integrate the sign in with Google. Let's go ahead on Clerk. I'm going to go into the docs. Clerk has amazing documentation, by the way. Let's go Expo. And I'm going to go into the, I think in the quick start. In the next step, there is auth with open authentication connection. So, first, we need to configure our dashboard, Clerk dashboard, with the social connections that we want. By default, we go to configure SSO connections, so social sign-on connections. And here we see that we have Google by default. We are going to test it with Google and slowly add more things. We don't have to provide any credentials when we are in development because Clerk has shared credentials, and we just need to, we can start integrating them without thinking about like credentials at the moment. So for Expo, what we will do is we're going to use a hook called use SSO. We're going to starve SSO flow by providing a strategy like Google. And then if everything is okay, we're going to do the same as we did before, setting the active session. So let's see what do we need here. Well, we need the Expo browser, which is going to be an in-app browser that will help us open these social sign-ins. So let's do npx expo install Expo web browser. We're also going to need the Expo auth session, and Expo auth session is some tools allowing us integrating like with open authentication flows. To install it, we need to install both auth session and Expo crypto. So let's copy this one from here, or simply write npx expo install expo-auth-session and Expo crypto. And now we are ready to follow the guide here in the documentation to see how we're going to do that. First of all, we have here a custom hook called use warm-up browser. On Android, this is going to, let's do import web browser and use effect from React. Expo web browser. Is it going to be like this? Well, it's going to be import everything as web browser from Expo web browser. So on Android, it's going to warm up, avoiding like the more loading time. Now, with this, we are going to call use warm-up browser inside the sign-in here. Come on, use warm-up browser. And when we exit the component, it's going to cool it down, basically close it. The next step is to say maybe complete auth session on the web browser, and it's going to be outside our component, like at the top level. And this is going to handle pending authentication sessions. Like when you come back, it's going to check if there is any auth session started before. Now we need the use SSO, and with that, we're going to start the SSO flow. Let me copy this part, use SSO and the on-press event. I'm going to copy it like this in our application. Inside the sign-in with, instead of the on-press, I'm going to put these two. Make sure to import use SSO from Clerk Expo and everything as auth session from here, and the use callback from React. So what's happening here? This use SSO gives us access to start single sign-on flow, like sign in with Apple, with Google, with anything, all social providers, or even with your custom SSO flows. In the on-press, what do we have here? We are calling the start SSO flow with a strategy, and here we specify what strategy. In this case, we are starting it with Google, and we have to provide a redirect URL. A redirect on native should depend on the schema, and this auth session make redirects will automatically take the schema in production of your application. So with this, it will know after you do the authentication, it's going to redirect back to your app. What's happening here? If created session, if there is a created session, it's going to set it as active. Otherwise, we have to manage it ourselves. Maybe show an error or something like that. So with that, if I go to sign in and if I press sign in with Google, what's going to happen? Nothing, because in the custom button, we didn't connect it with the on press. If now I'm going to reload, and if I go to sign in with Google, we're going to see a browser, in-app browser opening. I'm going to select my account. I'm going to set continue. I'm going to come back and I'm going to be authenticated. As simple as that. And if I go into the Clerk dashboard under the users, we're going to see that I have a new user with this account. In the email address, it has this email address, and social account, it has Google. And that's it, guys. That's how you integrate social sign-ins. In the configure, we have integrated the sign-in with Google provider. Before you go to production, you're going to need to create your own credentials for Google. So make sure to follow that. I'm going to show you the documentation. If we go into the docs, it should be here. SSO types, no. Before you start, yeah, this is the guide. So under social connections, all providers, go ahead and select the provider you want to set it up, for example, Google, and you're going to see that information about that and how you can enable Google for production instances. You must provide custom credentials, and here is information how to get these custom credentials. You need to create a Google developer project, and there you're going to have to set up the Android and the iOS files, and then you're going to get a client ID and client secret that you're going to come back here under SSO, Google, and you're going to do use custom credentials for the client and secret. So yeah, make sure to do that before going to production. And in order to add new social sign-ons, what you have to do is simply add a connection for all users. For example, you can add Facebook. You're going to have it here also with shared credentials. And the only thing that is going to change is in the strategy, you're going to change from Google to auth Facebook. And that's it. It's going to open a different auth provider. Okay, I think I'm going to leave it here. Git add, git commit, sign in with Google. And what I'm going to do, actually, if you enjoyed this tutorial, make sure to subscribe to our channel. And I'd like to say big thank you to Clerk for sponsoring this tutorial on authentication. I hope you learned a lot, and whenever you're going to need to implement authentication in your apps, you can easily come back here and learn all the steps from building the UI to integrating the React hook form to manage the state of your forms, to using Zod to validate your data to make sure that it's a proper schema, to using React Expo Router to manage and guarding different parts of your application, integrating Clerk to manage, create accounts and manage user accounts, and also integrate social sign-ins like sign in with Google. What I'm going to do is, this is going to actually be the first time that I'm going to do this. Not sure if you know, but we recently launched the Notjust Club. The Notjust Club is a special group of people that wants to learn more, wants to have access to exclusive tutorials and extended live builds. Because I always, for every project that I'm doing on YouTube, I have something more, a little bit more that I want to cover, but I cannot do that publicly here because we have to optimize the videos for the YouTube algorithm and so on. But now I'm going to be able to provide more value and to go more in depth into these tutorials with our Notjust Club. It's super easy to join if you're interested. All you have to do is go on our channel, press the join button, and you're going to see the join button, and Notjust Club members are going to have access to exclusive tutorials, extended live builds. So after these builds, I'm going to continue implementing some extra features, and you're also going to get a exclusive Discord role. So what's going to happen now? If you're interested, go join the club right now. And if you're already part of a club, or if you're watching this later, you're going to find the video on the channel. Now, if you're watching this live, I'm stopping this public live stream and I'm going to start a new live stream only for club members. I'm going to still figure it out because it's the first time I'm doing this, but if you're a club member, just go to the live stream, and probably in 5 minutes, there will be a new live stream where I'm planning to continue this tutorial by adding additional social sign-ins. I want to add sign-in with Apple, I want to add sign-in with Facebook. I want to make sure that these buttons look really nice. And if we manage, maybe I'm also going to show you how to get and set up the production credentials, which for a lot of people is very confusing. That step is really hard to do. And if we have time there and if I have energy, we're going to do it together. Also, I can answer any questions that you have. So it's a great place to cool down and to do something more that you're interested. So if you like that, make sure to join the club. You're also, if you do it later, you're going to have access to these extra bonus videos on our channel by going to the live streams. All right, so I'll see you if you're a part of a Notjust Club. I'll see you in probably 5 minutes if everything goes smoothly. If not, thank you very much for staying here till the end. The source code to this tutorial is going to be available in the description below. Let me know in the comments what other things you want me to do, and I'll see you later. Thank you very much and have a nice day.